Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Welcome into a January 11th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Tyler Remchuk and Stephen Ellis with you on a Wednesday to talk some hockey. And, you know, Stephen, we really are passionate about what we do. In the seconds leading up to this show, I was trying to get an answer out of you. Kochetkov for Moritz Seider. Do I pull the trigger on this deal in my fantasy league?
No, I just again, it depends on how important goalies are of value, but like just Kochetkov, I love riding on him right now. He's so much fun to watch when he's playing, but who knows if he's on the roster a week or two from now.
Stephen Ellis, the co-host and half of the Puck Poolies podcast. So if you have some other fantasy hockey questions, throw them into the YouTube chat on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. Maybe we'll carve out some time to get to a few of those in our inbox segment. But let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock and start with the hockey game we got last night on national TV between the Panthers and the Avalanche. Stephen, nothing makes me happier than when you sit down to watch one of these games that you know is being broadcast on ESPN and it delivers, and it just brings so much excitement. A 5-4 final for the Panthers, but the third period of this one was nuts. It was 4-1 Florida, and then you blink, and it's 4-4, but then a goal got disallowed, so it's 4-3, and then right back to 4-4 again, and then Florida finds a way to win it with Matthew Tkachuk scoring his second of the game. It was a fascinating one, and for Florida, it brought them back up to 19 wins and 19 losses on the year. It is going to be really tough for them to make the postseason, though. If they want to get to 100 points, they need 58 points in their final 40 games, so they essentially have to go 29-11 down the stretch. Steven, do you give the Panthers any shot of using this as maybe a springboard to turning around their season?
Well, first off, I was watching the game. It was 3-0 early. I'm like, okay, this game's over. Turn it back on, and it's like this 4-4. It's like, oh my God, what happened? I said it before. The Panthers. Heading into the season, I wasn't thrilled with their summer. And yeah, they went out there and got Tkachuk, who was one of the biggest trade targets. But you had to give up so much to make that happen. And I think I think everyone kind of agreed that having to trade Uyghur was a big deal, but I don't think anyone expected the impact of his loss to be as much as it is, because while Montour and Forsling have stood up this year a bit more than we expected, the goaltending was still a liability, and that hasn't helped them. And then obviously they've had some injuries up front, and I think they could have really used a guy like Uyghur in the lineup. So I'm not totally confident about this group. I didn't think they would be missing the playoffs, but I did think they'd be closer to the bottom of the playoff race. The fact that they're probably on the outside looking in going forward is definitely not what I expected.
And on the other side of this matchup, a loss in regulation on home ice for the Colorado Avalanche on a night where the Flames at least got a point, the St. Louis Blues beating them in overtime. So a bunch of teams around you managed to scoop up points. The Preds have won 4 in a row. And you look at the Avs, who, you know, compared to the Panthers, not as much panic, because I think there's more of a belief in this roster. They're starting to get healthier as well. And they've only played 39 games so far this season. But it's starting to get late early for the Avalanche. And if they don't pick it up quickly, like eventually you get to a point where you just fall behind the math. The Avs also are facing some pressure here in the next probably 10 games leading up to the deadline, or 10, 20 games leading up to the deadline.
Yeah, for the Avalanche, this was a team that everyone kind of expected to take a slight step down, especially with their goaltending. But you look at how many injuries they've had to deal with this year, and I don't think it's completely fair to really pin it on that. I think it's fair to pin it on the injuries as to why they're struggling, because they still got most of that same core. Goaltending has been hit or miss. Georgiev earlier in the season, I think, was having a much better run than he is having now. But it's hard when you're having to deal with all those injuries on the back end specifically to really go out there and have to shine every night. And I don't think Francouz has really stood up the way he could have. His save percentage is almost the same as Georgiev, but there's been some games where you just start shaking your head there. And we saw that in the playoffs last year too, which is why I was concerned about this goaltending duo. But I think the fact is, when this group's fully healthy, the Avalanche are a very tough team to beat no matter what, but they've just had a tough time actually having a full lineup out there.
Let's go back to the Eastern Conference here for topic number 2, and a team and a GM and Steve Yzerman who has quite the dilemma heading up to the trade deadline. This team is actually ahead of a group like the Florida Panthers in terms of points percentage, 41 points. They're 7 back of the Penguins for that final wildcard spot in the East, and they have a game in hand. But the big question kind of is, what do you think they could do on the trade front? They have some really interesting pending UFAs, a guy like Dylan Larkin, who I don't know if you saw that hilariously awkward interview with him and Paul Bissonnette on TNT the other day, but I don't think you're moving Larkin. But you have guys like Tyler Bertuzzi, who, if you were to dangle him at 50% retained, man, some contenders would probably love to add that guy ahead of the playoffs. But at the same time, you will probably want to send the right message to your young core and do right by guys like Seider and Larkin and other young pieces there. And you maybe don't want to totally sell off. You want them to get the experience of playing in a playoff push down the stretch. So maybe you just stand pat. Or do you think it would make sense maybe for the Wings to see if they can add some long-term pieces? If you were in Steve Yzerman's shoes, Stephen Ellis, this is where I'm getting. What would you do at the deadline?
I still think this is a team that still needs to maybe have another good draft or two to really kind of bulk up there. One name, definitely, I think if you're going for an attack, you maybe go out there and see what team's looking for, maybe in Marco Rossi. Marco Casper, who they picked last year in the first round. But I think with the Red Wings, you still got to keep just building towards that future. I don't think trading Dylan Larkin is the right thing, but you're going out there and maybe you're just trading off a guy like Oskar Sundstrom, who, he's played at the Blues during that Stanley Cup run a couple of years ago. He's got that experience. He's cheap. Maybe you go out there and you get I don't know what draft pick you maybe get, a second or third, but you just keep accumulating those. So to me, I don't think they're going to have a super aggressive. I don't think going out there and selling off, because this is a big step for the team. I didn't expect the Red Wings to be as kind of this much in the conversation, but I also don't think making the playoffs is great for them either. I think they still should be looking for those picks. So I think that you listen to every offer. This is a team that really should afford to be doing that, but I don't think they're going to go out there and blow things up or start acquiring all these big things and potentially hurt the future. I think you're looking at and say, we trust this group. This is the long term we're looking at here. We can be patient.
The one thing that's really interesting to me is between the pipes. Frank talked about this the other day, but Magnus Hellberg is one of the waiver claims. They apparently really like him. Alex Nedeljkovic has been down on a conditioning stint for a while here. Ville Husso's their number one. Nedeljkovic pending UFA, $3 million cap hit right now. I wonder if they could look around the league to a team that needs goaltending in the Pacific, specifically the Seattle Kraken or maybe the LA Kings as well. And maybe they move out a piece like Nedeljkovic and recoup some assets that way as well and continue building towards the future. Let's keep the trade talk going here. It's our daily deadline countdown segment, 52 days until the big day, that is. And today's article up at dailyfaceoff.com from Frank Saravalli is all about Jakob Chychrun, and it's titled Buyer Beware. And a couple of things that I found interesting from Frank's story is kind of how some teams view Chychrun. I think maybe some people don't watch him a lot, think, hey, legit top pairing guy, going to turn around our blue line. But Frank writes, teams believe Chychrun is an average middle pair guy as a defender. He has a tendency to be overly aggressive, especially without the puck. That leads to odd man rushes when he pinches at the blue line. That leads to him losing his man, losing his coverage in his own end. Maybe he's not quite the fit that teams think. How do you view Chychrun, Mr. Ellis? And do you think he's a guy who contenders should be lining up to add to their blue line?
I definitely agree that there's a liability there. And I was telling you before the show here, I went to watch him twice when he was a U16 player, and both times he was injured. And that seemed to kind of just spark a guy has not played a full NHL season in his career yet. I guess we can kind of consider that shortened COVID season, the 2021 season. But again, there's only 56 games. So this is a guy who's had an issue staying healthy. It feels like every couple of weeks we're looking at like, oh, he just left the game. Is he coming back? And then eventually comes back. And that's definitely concerning. But when you look at him, Luke Hughes is a kind of an interesting comparison when I kind of watching him at the World Juniors, where this is a guy that offensively, we know what he could do. He's very capable, but he does make a lot of mistakes in his own zone. He's not fully well-rounded. And for Chychrun, he could put up a lot of points, but at the same time, when you look at the team he's on in the context, he has to kind of be that guy. And I feel like he maybe gets stretched too thin sometimes. Maybe if he goes somewhere where he doesn't have to be that guy, maybe we see someone who kind of mellows out a bit better. But he's just I understand the need, the thought process of trading him, but I've been saying it from the start. Arizona, you need players to actually be playing that are NHL capable in the next couple of years. Do you really, really need to trade him? I think that I still would like to see him stay there and be a part of the future, as the future is starting to look a bit more promising for Arizona. But there's just a lot of red flags there, just on the way he plays in his own zone, and then just the injury history where I think it's a big risk no matter what.
Frank listed 6 potential fits in his story for the Coyotes defensemen: the Senators, the Leafs, the Kings, the Golden Knights, the Oilers, and the Panthers. I wonder about a team like the Panthers and their potential interest here, because again, he's a guy that has term. He's from that area as well. One of those 6 teams quickly, Steven, any one of them jump out to you as a good landing spot?
It's like, again, I still think that I just don't want to see him traded. I just want to see him there in Arizona.
Fair enough. Let's look at some other D-men that are potentially available, because that was another part of the piece Frank has up. Some guys who we kind of expect to be moved or who could potentially be moved before the deadline: John Klingberg in Anaheim, Vladislav Gavrikov in Columbus, Matthias Ekholm in Nashville, Erik Karlsson, Jake McCabe, Joel Edmondson. But one guy who's really interesting to me, if you're a team looking for an offensive defenseman, and maybe you don't want to commit to the term, you don't want to pay the price for Jakob Chychrun, what about Shane Gostisbehere? I mean, this is a guy who can put up points. This is a guy who's a pending UFA, 28 points in 40 games on a Coyotes team that's largely been below average for most of the season. If the asking price for Chychrun is a first, and a prospect, what's the asking price for Gostisbehere? We could be talking about maybe just a second, maybe just a third. Get that money retained down. You can squeeze him in along with some other additions. I think when I look at this list, Gostisbehere is the name who might be a little bit undervalued compared to what we're hearing about everyone else and their asking prices.
I think part of that is just because his career has been a lot of hit or miss. You look at his start in Philadelphia, and everyone's like, oh, like this guy's going to be huge. And then he had a couple of off years. He was a healthy scratch a lot. I think going to Arizona, the pressure was off, and he was going out there and was able to play the best hockey we've seen him play. And obviously could put up points. He's a guy that, for me, just because of some of the decision making he makes with the puck, I always thought he would have been better as like a middle 6 forward. I feel like that's the path he should have gone. But obviously he knows how to put up points. And again, kind of like Chychrun, if he goes to a place where he can kind of be a bit more freewheeling and play with someone who's a bit more defensively grounded, I think that he'd be a very valuable pickup.
The name who also jumps out, and we just started hearing about him over the last couple days, is Matt Dumba out in Minnesota. And I'm fascinated by this one because the Minnesota Wild are in a playoff spot. They're a team whose window is firmly right now. Matt Dumba, a UFA at the end of the year, carries a $6 million cap hit. And what we're hearing is they would like to make a hockey trade, maybe add to their forward group potentially as well. And Frank's done a lot about this being the year of the third-party broker. And I kind of wonder if this could also be the year of the 3-team trade. You know, a guy like Matt Dumba, maybe that's a piece that intrigues one of those 6 teams we listed as potential fits for Jakob Chychrun, but obviously those teams don't really want to subtract from their active roster either. So could you use a third party not only to hold some money, but also maybe send a forward the way of the Minnesota Wild? I think about a guy maybe like a Brock Besser, or we're even hearing rumblings about Kuzmenko in Vancouver. Like, could the Canucks be a team who says, yeah, we'll give Minnesota their forward and we get a pick, and whoever the third team is, you get Dumba, and oh, you're also giving us a pick as well. I wonder if we could see some more 3-team trades. It's spicy.
Yeah, no, I like that. And for Dumba, it's something where Kalen Addison coming along and playing as well as he's done in Minnesota. He's the top scoring defenseman for the rookie race. Having him play as good as he has made Dumba a bit more expendable. And I think for the Wild, you know, it's a solid team. You know, when the goaltending's hot, the goaltending's hot. And I think that the blue line is pretty decent, but they can use some extra scoring punch. So if it means trading Dumba, I think it's 100% worth it, because I do like Minnesota's kind of long-term defensive outlook. So again, to me, that's expendable.
Let's move along to our big segment today. We are now a week removed from the World Junior Hockey Championships, and junior hockey is buzzing with all these trades. Let's get into a couple of prospects, though, that you've had your eye on in the next wave. The next wave is brought to you by Montana's, and Steven, fans love watching the World Juniors and generally overreacting to what they see there. We get a lot of that around the hockey world. So we have 3 names that you have as kind of being disappointing in the World Juniors, and I want to know how concerned these fan bases should be with these prospects. So the first name is Brad Lambert. It felt like it was his 9th or 10th World Juniors, but he was not that good in the tournament. How concerning was that World Juniors for Lambert for you? And also, right move sending him back to junior.
Yeah, so Lambert going to Seattle, a team that just can't seem to stop scoring. And that was one of the teams rumored to be in on Connor Bedard. And just that would have been like the junior super team if that happened. But Lambert is someone where I'd say 2-3 years ago, we were looking at him for the 2022 draft as a very potential number 1 prospect, and he fell late in the first round. A lot of scouts were just concerned about he had fantastic speed, and when he shoots, he can shoot, but his compete level was weak, wasn't great defensively, and just kind of looked disengaged a lot. And I think we saw that at the juniors where Finland needed him to go out there and put up a lot of points. He just had the one goal, wasn't like virtually invisible. The Finns as a whole kind of just underwhelmed, but this isn't just a one-time thing. In the summer, he was a healthy scratch for the bronze or for the semifinal in the gold medal game. That was a bit of a shock. And then he started the year, had a really good preseason with the Jets, started off looking okay in the AHL, and then he just had 3 points before going to the juniors. So this is not just a short-term thing for Lambert. There are a lot of concerns where, again, he's got the speed to be a very quality NHL player. He's got the skill to be a quality NHL player. Why can't he put this on every single night? There's too many shifts where I feel like he's just floating out there. So I'm definitely concerned. He's got the talent to rebound, but right now it's just not looking good. I think going over to the WHL and hopefully putting up a lot of points can gain his confidence back, but it's been a tough year.
Yeah, he seems like just such a boom or bust kind of prospect. Either this guy's going to figure it out and score 25 plus goals for a decade in the NHL, or he's just going to fizzle out and never have much of a career. He feels like one of those situations. The second player you have on the list is Bruins prospect Fabian Lysell, who was ejected in the bronze medal game, I believe, and it put an end to a relatively quiet tournament for the guy. But again, the scale of not concerned to very concerned. Where do you sit here, and what did you see that was concerning in the World Juniors?
Well, he was brought in to generate offense and to score goals, and getting 0 points in 7 games definitely is not exactly what you like to see. Compared to Lambert, I'm not concerned. I think the kind of just his body of work in the AHL stands for itself. Getting to watch him with Providence, this is a guy that I think is going to be a key piece of Boston's top 6 for a while. Very quick skater, just like Lambert, maybe one of the fastest skating prospects in the league. I feel like there's points where he'll rush the puck and no one can keep up with him. The play just fizzles out. So that's something at the NHL level, I think people will be able to keep up with him a bit more, but very few prospects can shoot a wrist shot like Fabian Lysell, so I'm not concerned.
And let's go between the pipes for our third name here, and I'm going to do my best not to butcher this name, Steven, but it's Canucks goaltending prospect Aku Koskeno. Did I nail it?
Koskenvo, so very close. And this is a guy that entering this tournament had a whopping 2 games played for Harvard. He went and played at a U20 Five Nations tournament and looked really good in November. But otherwise, this is a guy that just didn't play a whole lot. And it looked like he was still going to be the starting goalie. You know, he was the high-profile Finnish goalie prospect. Finland was the only team with 2 NHL goalie prospects in the entire tournament, which was quite shocking. But going out there and just he did not look comfortable in the pre-tournament game against the United States. I feel like he was part of the reason why they lost. Then they go out there, they lose to Switzerland. You know, all credit to the Swiss. I thought they looked great out there, but Koskenvo allowed a couple goals you would have hoped to save. And then they started him against the United States again for the final game to decide who wins the group. And I think that one was really important because Finland was the team that had more points. And if they held on to that group victory, they may have had a completely different run to the championship. Instead, they were out in the quarterfinal. And part of that, I think, was Koskenvo just laid an egg against the Americans. So I think this is someone where he's still a talented goalie. I think he's got great size. He's 6'4". I think he was 6'4.5" when I saw the WHF size chart. But when it comes to him, he just needs to start playing because this is a guy that's got about 6 games played all year long, and it's not necessarily due to injury. So I'm a little concerned, but I still think he's got the talent to bounce back. It's just like, again, playing time matters.
Yeah, and that's a really good point as well, especially with a position like that. You want to see guys getting those reps in at different levels. Fantastic insight, as always, from you, Stephen Ellis. The next wave brought to you by Montana's. They're bringing back the viewing party this season. And today, Wednesday, oh, look at that. Look at that. All you can eat ribs at your local Montana's. Head to montanas.ca for more info. Moving along to our daily face-off inbox question, hashtag AskDFO, and I love this one, Steven. One song that you can ban from NHL games for eternity. What are you picking?
I was going to go for a hot take and say the entire discography, so it's not one song, but the entire discography of the Tragically Hip, but I'm actually going to go with Sweet Caroline. That song should be nowhere near a hockey rink. It's just so annoying. The fact that the only lyrics anyone actually knows is the part, it's just no thank you. There's too many songs that get played over and over again, like Seven Nation Army, blah blah blah, and I challenge DJs to actually go out there and be creative. I used to be a DJ for junior hockey games, and I'd say like I played a lot of stuff that you won't hear typically at games, a lot of Sum 41, a lot of Dragon Force, a lot of more obscure Metallica, but you know what, let's hear something just a bit different.
You got layers like an onion, Stephen Ellis, a prospects guy, a fantasy guy, and a music buff as well. I love it. For me, it is like not a song, but it's this thing that's done now at stadiums in like across all sports. They do the Freddie Mercury like vocal warm up thing. I think it's
Oh
from like the
yeah.
Live Aid show, and they try to get the crowd doing like the hey oh. I hate it. I hate it. I get that it like gets the fans engaged and all of that, but that is my one thing that drives me absolutely bananas. And it's at the point where not even when I'm just at NHL games and they do it and I have the biggest eye roll ever. It's when I'm watching a game on TV, they're coming back from break, the puck is dropping, and I now like hear it in the background and it drives me nuts. I can't stand that cheesy stuff just trying to get like cheap fan engagement. I hate it.
I'll add to that. Just if you need a sound bite to get the fans excited, you're doing it wrong. And I think a good example of that is the Spengler Cup. The crowd at Davos is absolutely like electric all game long. They're loving life. And I know that's more of a European sports thing, but European fans just enjoy the game for what it is. You don't need music to go out there and get the crowd excited. So if you need a song to get people to like feel engaged, again, you need a completely different atmosphere there. And also the thing about the Spengler Cup was, because I love that tournament, that might be the only time I ever see like the refs get cheered at the start of every game. Like when they go out in an NHL ice, they're always instantly booed, but the refs are appreciated there. I don't know. It's different.
Maybe the home side would get more calls if we adapted that in North America a little bit. To wrap up this conversation, the wave, yes or no?
No, it's weak. It's weak. And it's like, well, wasn't the original meaning was like, it was just like fans were just mad at their team and that was their way of saying you suck? Wasn't that the original meaning of that?
There's so many different like origin stories for the wave. I honestly have no idea. All right, we got to wrap this up and move along to our PointsBet daily bets. Went 1-1 yesterday because, of course, the one time I bet on the Jets, Connor Hellebuck has probably his worst game of the season. So bang on, accurate for the year. But let's get into tonight's slate brought to you by PointsBet Canada. Actually, not a ton I love. I don't want to touch the Leafs because, again, no Austin Matthews, and they're playing a red hot Nashville team, but I do have a play for this game, and it's Nino Niederreiter to go over 1.5 shots. He's hit this in 4 of his last 5, and he's been at least 3 shots on goal in 3 of those 5. He's crushing it. This line shouldn't be set at 1.5. The payout's not great at -180, so what I'm doing here is I'm parlaying this bad boy. I'm throwing it in with Eric Gustafsson to go over 1.5 shots as well. With John Carlson out, Gustafsson's been picking up a lot of the offensive slack on this blue line. He's a guy who, if you can still get him in fantasy, I'd take a peek at him. But he's gone over this mark in 4 of his last 5 as well. I love both these guys to do it. You play them together, it's +140, and I love it so much I'm throwing 2 units on it. I'm really confident in these 2 guys. I love when shot props get dropped down to that 1.5 mark, and I think we're getting a ton of value in 2 guys who have been crushing it as of late. So, Steven, that is my one play. It is a big parlay as well. And, yeah, anything you like tonight on the NHL slate? I know you dabble a little bit.
Well, I'll be at the Leafs Predators game. I love just seeing Nashville's jerseys in person. I'm a big jersey guy. I can sort of see
Yeah.
my list of 80 jerseys over there, but I will always have a soft spot for when teams go out there and have super bright jerseys. So I always like seeing Nashville in person. But it'll be, you know what, I watched a lot of AHL games. I'm excited to see Bobby McMahon make his NHL debut. So it's a good night for that.
Should be a good night of hockey. Let's get to garbage time. Usually I cede the floor to you, but I'm taking it today. Saw that the trailer for the PGA Netflix series dropped today, and it looks fantastic. What a year to be following the PGA with all the live tour stuff. So I'm very excited for this. It's from the people who made Drive to Survive as well. And I'm saying, Steven, why do we not have more stuff like this in hockey? I know there was that kind of weird Leafs documentary that went out on Amazon. I know the Oilers do stuff, but it's behind their Oilers Plus paywall. I think it is just such an easy way to grow the game. There are great stories in hockey. And I even think back to when they would do the Winter Classic series on HBO and how good that was and how many sound bites and video clips still go around from that series today. NHL needs to be more bingeable. Steven, your thoughts?
I agree, and it's something where just the best marketing tour, or the marketing material. You look at Drive to Survive, where F1 was kind of at a part where it wasn't really getting too exciting, it wasn't growing. This show comes in to a league or a series that is typically very like guarded, like very hard to get access to the drivers, and saw us shown a side that got people who didn't care about racing one bit to fall in love with the sport. So I think it's a no-brainer. My one concern is we are starting to see more things like this. IndyCar's doing one, NASCAR's did one, and now you got golf. So I feel like eventually it might get a bit oversaturated, but you know, it's also different sports, different markets, who knows?
And it just goes to show that if you kind of push the envelope marketing wise and don't just do the same old stuff over and over again, good things can happen. Like with the sport of F1, which is the fastest growing sport now in North America. Fantastic stuff today. Steven, thanks to everyone who tuned in on the Daily Faceoff YouTube and on our Twitter and Facebook. If you miss a show, we are available as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts from as well. In the meantime, keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com for all your hockey needs. Frank Saravalli back in the big chair tomorrow. We'll chat with you then.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.